Hello, everyone. Welcome to another of the Evolve Online webinars, the series that we're doing at the moment to provide support and advice to our parents. I'm very fortunate, excited today to be joined by two amazing therapists, Renisha and Bashira, who in a moment I'll ask them to introduce themselves. One of the questions that comes up quite often in the homeschooling environment is or relates to situations where children need therapy or need support or need some learning intervention in order to be able to succeed. Obviously, in a brick and mortar school, what generally happens is there will be a therapist or someone who works at the school, and that person would then do the interventions. But obviously, in our context, where our kids might be in a very remote location or where our kids might not be able to afford very high-end costs. That's not to say the two of you aren't high-end. Please don't misunderstand me. It's just that I know from our conversations that you've got a particular model that tries to make this kind of therapy more affordable. So let me just quickly start and ask you first, Renisha, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the audience?
Great. Thank you for having us. My name is Renisha Patel. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm based in Cape Town, but with my partner Bashira have started My Online Therapist as a way to increase access to therapists for families and their children specifically. We are mainly a pediatric practice, but we see all ages. And our biggest vision and mission is to allow for people to get early support. So the minute you have that worry in your mind, that's the minute you should have access to a therapist to at least ask that question that's worrying you. Yep. That's me.
Yeah. That's a whistle stop. Bash, before I ask you to do the same, just to pick up on one of two things that you've said, Renisha, I think that the concern that all parents have is there something wrong? Do I need, is my child developing at the pace they're supposed to? And then they hear horror stories because they will go to a party and the one kid is already, or four of the other kids are already walking and their child is still crawling. And so, what's wrong with my child? And as they get older into our kind of context, it's about learning to read, learning to write. And there's always this concern that a parent has of, is my child on track? And so, having very clear view of the milestones and also the range. So, it's not that when you turn 2, you should talk, and when you turn 1, you should walk. There's a range. Yeah. Having now put my 5 cents worth in, Bashira, please, let's hear a bit about you.
Thanks, Colin. My name is Bashira Surti. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been working with Ren at My Online Therapist for just over 2 years now. And I have a special interest in sensory integration. Yes. And that's where this presentation comes in and ties so nicely with the approach that Renisha brings in, being a mum and looking at the emotional side of a child's development. So I think together, just, making the presentation easy and simple for parents and people to understand, even though there is a lot of scientific background to sensory integration and why we do what we do.
Yeah. And I think, again, Bashira, it's great to have you give up so much of your time to talk to me today, but also that issue that you raise of, the parents being able to understand what is very complex. So, scientifics and teachers are no different. We imagine words, we come up with great phrases to sort of create this kind of club of only the people who know the words can understand what we are talking about, and academics are brilliant at inventing new jargon to confuse the masses. So demystifying this sort of thing is something that's important. And you and I have chatted a little bit, all three of us have chatted a little bit about this whole sensory integration thing. It's actually what led me to want to invite you to join, to do a webinar with me, because I was so taken by just the simplicity, but the depth of what you offer. And we will go through the presentation as we go along. So homeschooling is always a challenge. And the reason it's always a challenge is because, first of all, there's an enforced isolation. Because I'm at home, it's not like a brick and mortar experience where I'm bumping against other children. I can't compare myself to other children, so I don't have a context for that. And so that's the one challenge. The other challenge, as I've mentioned earlier, is this remoteness, this being in a remote place. And that's why online therapists, the My Online Therapists model really was attractive to me, because, being an online school, how do we sort of try and find services for our children in the context that they're in? Could you, Renisha, if you wouldn't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about the origin of My Online Therapists, how it came about that you set up My Online Therapists?
Yes, sure. So My Online Therapist really was a product of lots of different models of trying to improve access to therapy. So Bashir and I started in 2016 already. We won a hackathon where we presented an idea on an app for parents of children with disabilities. And the model just sort of as evolved and iterated. And then in 2019, we, with all the research we had done from overseas and models that we had seen over there, we decided it was time to launch in South Africa. And COVID hit at a time that allowed for all the regulations that was stopping telehealth and teletherapy. All those regulations dropped, and we were allowed to really practice a lot of the business models and the practices that we were storing in the background to launch when those restrictions dropped. And we started seeing families who had never firstly heard of therapy before, but have never had access to it before. And we've done over 3,000 online sessions to date. We've serviced about 500 families. So we really are growing. And what we see is, what we're learning is the value it has in the South African context. South Africa is a very unique country. There's lots of diversity, and therefore we as therapists need to be innovative, creative, and diverse ourselves. And we have to work really closely with parents. And a lot of our work is sharing that knowledge, transferring that skills over to parents, to teachers, so that we create a system that is centered around the support of the child. So no matter your context, whether you're a homeschooling or you are in a school that is supportive, we are able to assist in just looking at the big picture and connecting. Our big role is connecting all the stakeholders around the child to support that child. Me personally, my personal journey is that I'm a mom of twins, and at the time that I had my twins, I couldn't really leave the house, but I knew my anxiety was peaking and I needed help. And that was for the first time ever that I tried Skype with a psychologist. And after that, I actually haven't gone back. It's convenient for me. I fit it into my schedule, and it's supportive. And it's regular and it's consistent. And that's exactly what we wanted to offer families as well, is affordable enough so that it can be consistent, because consistent therapy makes it for effective therapy. Yeah. So I could go on forever about.
I can see that. And I love your passion as well. I mean, it dovetails so nicely with what Evolve Online offers, because we have a mastery-based approach, as you know, and the whole idea behind trying to fit your learning in to your lifestyle, rather than trying to fit your lifestyle into a artificial schedule of things where everybody has to march at the same pace. I'm going to come back to the core truth of Evolve, which is at the center of everything we do rests a single question. And that question is, what should a child now be able to do? And I know I've discussed this with the two of you already. So I'm going to just cycle back to that at the end. But I want to give Bash a quick opportunity before I start showing that lovely animation that you have. I want to just give her a quick opportunity to just, in a couple of phrases, sensory integration. What is that? How does a person understand the term sensory integration?
In a couple of sentences, it is how an individual receives information from the world around them and from inside their bodies, their organs, how those messages travel to their brain, how it's processed, and the behavior, the response to that stimulation. So the key word is process. It is a process. The information coming in, processed, executed.
Thank you. That was very well done in a single sentence. So let's dig in. I'm going to just quickly now take the next step. So I suppose the first thing I would ask my students to do, Ren and Bash, is to just critique your cartoon versions of yourselves.
Welcome to My Online Therapist. We promote early access to support for children and families through online therapy services. As parents, we want the absolute best for our children from the day they are born. But parents have shared with us that finding the right support when their child needs it is daunting and overwhelming. Families often lack time, and the information on where to start is not easily accessible. We have made our services approachable, responsive, and family-centered for you. We have 4 focus areas: early childhood intervention, school readiness, school going, and mental health. Your journey with My Online Therapist starts with a consultation with one of our case managers. These case managers have more than 10 years' experience in supporting families. This step is important in ensuring that the service is customized to each family while sharing best practice that has worked for other children and families. Your case manager will recommend a therapist that has the relevant experience to address your child's needs and available during your best times. The best match with a therapist is as important as the therapy itself, and we take extra care with this step. After the first assessment, both therapist and parent agree on a therapy plan. Then therapy begins with your family. It is done in the comfort of your home using technology, resources available to you, and effective techniques to get the best results. Regular and consistent online therapy sessions means that your child and therapist build a relationship, the child is set up for success, and families get regular feedback on how their child is progressing and how to further support this at home. All our therapists and teachers have been trained in telehealth and receive regular supervision and support. We use a team approach to ensure whole child development. Your support is a click away.
You've put an agenda together of what you want us to get through during our webinar today, recognizing sensory processing and then building a web of support for optimal learning. What I take away from what the video showed and what I think my parents should note is the model that you have of, we get to see what's happening, we come up with a plan, and then we execute that plan. And the cynical me has already spoken to you about, when does therapy end? And that again is part of that core question of what should a child now be able to do. And so I would expect, if there was to be a proper match between Evolve Online and My Therapist Online, is to have a similar kind of approach of saying, these are the goals that we're going to measure to see whether or not we're achieving the outcome. So this is what we want the child to be able to do at the end of this therapy session. And I'm assuming, and you can now just maybe talk to that, that's exactly how you approach it. You've got an end in mind.
No, that's exactly it. We take an empowerment approach so that development in childhood doesn't end in the early years, or it's continuous. And this is what a lot of what therapy is also about, is preparing the families, even the child, the parents, for what's to come. So we're not just doing therapy for you here now, but we know what's coming. We know the challenges that are coming ahead, or the developmental milestones ahead. So we can, for now, we would say, okay, this goal is achieved, but be mindful that this is coming next. And that's why it seems like therapy is constantly happening with kids, because they're developing constantly. But I think our approach is one of empowerment and skills transfer, so that the parent then knows where to look, or where to ask for help, or how to approach the situation. And a lot of that time it saves detriment to the child's self-esteem. And that's the part that we want to keep intact, so that asking for help is not seen as a problem, because we all know life comes with its ups and downs. So yeah, we definitely take a targeted approach, and we like to give our families the opportunity to also engage in that approach. Say, okay, let's do this for 3 months, we reassess, and then decide what the plan is after that.
Great.
An example is a child that I had seen today, who was 2.5 years old. I had seen that child a year ago, and I started seeing him when he was 6 months old. So it's about the parents having an available support to them as the child transitions. It's equipping them with the skills that they needed at 6 months. They continue with their lives. At 2.5 years, they realize, oh, actually, there's this thing I'm concerned about. I need to speak to someone.
They come back.
And they have someone to go to. And it's an important relationship that you also, that takes time to build, and it takes time to get to know the child and the family and really work with them and find solutions that work for them. So going back to someone where there's been good results is important as well.
Yeah, I get that. And what I also like is the idea of the parent becoming a co-therapist as such. The parent, because in a online schooling, in a homeschooling context, that's exactly how it works as far as the educational side of a child's life is. We provide teachers, we provide the curriculum, but the very clear understanding that it's a partnership where the role of the parent in the learning of the child is far greater than what it would normally be in a brick and mortar space. And the parent has, in a way, far more access to an understanding of what their child is learning. And therefore, in partnership, they would also know when there's a problem sooner, possibly, than what a parent might do if their child is attending a brick and mortar school. So exciting. Bash, are you now going to take us a little bit through? So I'm not sure, because I've got control of the slides. So you just have to let me know when you think I need to change a slide, or what you need me to do, and I'll just press the buttons. But over to you guys.
Thank you. So I'm going to start the first half of the presentation, and this is really just to make sure that the initial content is parent friendly, and it's speaking to the simple things. So we're going to start, and we're going to test this out with you, Colin. How are you feeling right now? So if you had to choose from these examples, where would you put yourself? Are you working hard to keep your brain awake?
No, not at all. I would put myself a little bit in the I'm feeling excited.
Okay.
Probably 40%, and then I don't know if I'd call it overwhelmed, but certainly there's a degree of stress around trying to make sure that this webinar system runs properly, and that we have a successful webinar. Yeah.
Great. And that self-awareness is the first step, even for a parent. It's the first, where am I? How am I feeling right now? So we can move to the next slide. The next slide is asking, if you had a poor night's sleep, what would your morning look like? So Colin, what do you do? Do you lay in bed longer? Do you have a warm shower to get you going, a sugary breakfast, play some music, open the curtains? Any of these speaking to you?
My goodness, obviously there's no single pattern. I probably just moan a lot. But yeah, a hot bath always helps. I don't have the luxury of staying in the bed longer because I've got a job to do. I'm diabetic, so I certainly don't eat a sugary breakfast.
Okay.
But I do find, and this is interesting, not necessarily favorite, and I actually learned this when I was in the army, but when I'm struggling, uh, playing music that creates mood
Yes.
is quite an effective strategy for me. So, I might play calming music, I might play heavy metal, I might, anything. And I do find that helps me get to the right mental state for the day.
Great. So this is a very simple example to show this is a sensory strategy. It's a strategy that you put into place to firstly become aware of where you're at and shift yourself, to a place of movement and activity to get yourself going. So, it'd be lovely for parents to also do the same and think through what your day, is this actually a sensory strategy that I'm doing? It feels good and it's getting me to do something that I'm doing. So a lot of the things we do are actually sensory strategies without even realizing it. So this is essentially what this question is just trying to highlight. So we can move over to the next slide.
Before we do, what resonates for me here is the concept of metacognitive thinking. So thinking about your thinking or being aware, when you're trying to do a mastery-based approach to learning, it's critical that children get given more than one opportunity to do a task or to write a test, okay? And it's critical, the really critical part is not the writing of the test. The critical part is the analyzing the results of your writing of the test and coming up with strategies to improve your performance. We use this lovely phrase, 3 before me, by which we mean before you ask an adult for help, what other 3 things have you tried? And if I was to align that to what I've just seen, there's a lovely takeaway for parents if their children are struggling to start in the morning or struggling to get going, because remember, they're not in a class where a teacher's going to shout at them if they're not concentrating. But what 3 things could you try to kickstart your day is my takeaway from what you've just taught me. And as you say, it's sometimes not something that you consciously do.
Yes.
But bringing it into consciousness is
do it repeatedly, right? And then you see results. With repetition comes even more results. So I think you've also helped me hit this one in hard, which is great. Thank you for that. It's the minute it's aware, it's in your awareness, you can use it as a skill and a strategy, and not just that helped today.
Yeah. And it ties into the concept of agency. Being able to believe that you are capable to change things, or to learn things, or to do things, is if the students of Evolve leave with just one skill, I would want them to have the skill of agency as they go. Okay, let's have a look at the next one.
Great. So we wanted to use an example that most people in today's day and age can relate to, especially in the online world, which is ordering on Takealot. So I want you to think of the learner's or the child's learning process as a Takealot delivery service. There are multiple orders, there's multiple processes, and each order has a specific destination or a happy customer to get to, right? That's when you know your Takealot service is working well. And there are many different conveyor belts. There's lots of information coming through. Some boxes will come, if you use this representation of the mind, this is the information. The boxes and the orders that are coming through are multiple. That's the information that's coming through to the child. And it ends up in the brain. That's where it needs to be sorted and processed, put on the right track, and delivered to the right place. And this is really just showing that it's a process. Your Takealot box doesn't arrive at your door without lots of little different steps happening before you're happy with your order. Yeah, the minute you press add to cart, and the time you get it, it's quite a process. So it's really just keeping that in mind. And I think we really wanted to find an example that parents can, the next time they see a Takealot box, they can really acknowledge and say, okay, that was a process. It wasn't as quick as the click of a button, which honestly, we sometimes assume our kids should know. Be like, oh, but I told you that yesterday, or I told you this, right? I just said this to you. How can you not remember it? So it really is about saying some processes moved too fast. Some processes move too slow. Some processes are new, completely new. So the next slide also just brings it home a little bit more. Here we have our delivery guys. So driver A, who's in the red, he's got his package. He got it on time. He's got clear directions, and there is actually someone at home to collect the package. This is a successful delivery. Okay, so there was someone there to receive it, to acknowledge it. It was a good one. Then driver B, he's got a very slow engine on his car. His car moves very slowly. So he's either always late for his deliveries, a day or so late. So the customers aren't that happy. They're kind of like, okay, it got here, but it was quite late, So a little bit unsatisfied, maybe feeling a bit, comparing himself to the other drivers. He won't feel great about himself, right? And you do have kids whose processes are slower. That is just their nature, something we have to also accept. Then you have driver C, which let's say Shame. He's the guy in the green. And he has just got too many boxes on his cart. He's got orders from the day before that he didn't deliver yet. His cart is overloaded. It's disorganized. He is overwhelmed. And that's why the boxes are going to end up at the wrong place. You're going to open your box and you ordered jug, but you got a shoe. It's just going to be where in the world, it's not comprehensible, and you're going to have upset customers. So this is really to show that the brain is essentially where you want that's the destination, but there are processes that move from the brain out of the body, and behavior affects those things. So there can be definitely traffic jams along the way. And we want to you can move on to the next slide and just show you what are those different sensory information. So you get, visual information. That's a lot of your reading. That's a lot, your screen time, absorbing a lot of that. You get visual learners, learners who can do this process super fast. I'm a visual learner myself, and that's why making presentations is something I enjoy doing, because it's how I express myself as well. Hearing is also something, auditory, how people process what they hear. So that's why people love these audio books, because there's tons of people who would prefer to listen to books than to read books, right? Touch, people who are quite tactile. Organ awareness, which people overlook, but what's going on inside your body has a big influence. You can imagine if a child is sitting with a full bladder, he's not going to be able to process what you've just taught him if nobody checks in and say, you look a bit wiggly. Do you think that there's something going on inside the body? Smell, body awareness, and movement. And we know with our ADHD kids, a lot of them are sensory seekers who can just be super bouncy, super jumpy, always on the move. And we need to understand, is that helping their learning process, or is it, is it a problem of stopping? A lot of the time, it looks like it's not helping, but it could actually be helping. So am I handing over to Bash yet? No. So this is the warehouse, right? So this is the typical Take-A-Lot warehouse. And this is typically what you want to see in a warehouse. Well organized, everything has its place. And the different sensations or the different boxes that are coming, a lot of the time we need to inhibit the outside information, We need it needs to go find its place, sit on the shelf until I'm ready for you. So a lot of the time, we all as humans have learned this inhibitory skill of inhibiting the outside senses, but it's still something that a lot of kids need to learn. And that's for them to have a warehouse like this. And a lot of the therapy work we do does that. And things like emotions and trauma, you can see, will affect your warehouse, And if we move over to the next slide, you can see some
it looks like my warehouse.
Somewhere at the end of the day, my warehouse also can look like this, You've just rummaged through there trying to find what you're looking for. You've had a meltdown in between. Someone's called you a name, or you had a bad mark on a
test, whatever.
A test. Your warehouse will be struggling. But the amazing thing is that we can help reset the brain. The brain is neuroplastic. It can learn, it create new pathways and new routes. And that's the exciting thing about sensory integration, which Bash is going to move on to next. Or we can take a quick break if you want to chat through any of this, Colin.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep going, but I just want to say, with my webinars, what we try to do is we try to say, okay, so what's in it for the parent or the child now? What of what we've all just been through? What's the takeaway? What can I do differently tomorrow as a parent based on what you've said? From my perspective, one of the big neuromyths in education is this whole idea of Gardner's different styles of learning, which you alluded to around, I'm a visual learner, I'm an auditory learner. And I think that, what we guard against is the labeling problem of, a child being labeled as a visual learner starts to limit themselves because they then rely on that label as a reason for trying to process a lack of success.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so both these things always have upsides and downsides, and you would know better than me. The human body is incredibly complex. We are all visual learners. We are all auditory learners. We are all touch kinetic learners.
All on the spectrum.
Yeah, we learn, and what we are finding in terms of that is trying to match what is being learned to the delivery mechanism that is most efficient in providing the learning. So there's certain things that it's much easier to teach a child using a visual means.
Yeah.
And there are other things that it's easier to teach a child using a tactile approach. We send boxes home in foundation phase. We don't expect grades 0 to 3 to learn on a screen exclusively. It's not healthy. It's not appropriate. It doesn't actually lead to the right learning. So we'd rather you have a box full of sensory items, learning items that will allow you to take your learning into other sensory spaces. And I'm sure Bash would be very supportive of that approach. So let's look at your side of the presentation, Bashira. Let's hear what you would like to share with us.
Great. So this is basically a continuation, and we've given you context of what sensory processing is. And I think an important piece for parents to take away from that as well is that we often only talk about 5 senses, but there's actually 8 senses. And the 3 hidden ones that we mentioned was the movement, the body awareness, and interoception. So that's the sense of the body organs. And those 3 we'll touch on in this slide as well, where you see in the world we live in today, we've just come through 2 years of lockdown, COVID. We don't know exactly when this is going to end. It feels a bit better, but there's a lot that's happened in 2 years. And if we look generally at the population and as humans, what are our sensory systems like right now? We see that we have systems that are overloaded. So that is our vision and auditory. Okay, we are learning on screens, we playing on screens, we listening a lot. Those are the systems that are really overloaded. It's not always a negative. So these senses have also allowed us to learn in situations where we wouldn't have been able to learn. So those systems are overloaded. Then we have systems that have been deprived, and that's the sense of touch, the sense of smell, and taste. And that comes a lot from our social engagements, from going out into the world. Kids have not had the same opportunities in the last 2 years as they would have possibly had before. They didn't get the chance to play outside as much as they wanted, to play with their friends as much as they wanted. And this is really where these senses come into play. And that's where you also develop a lot of emotional language, a lot of expression, a lot of social skills, a lot of communication. And that's where your sense of connection as well comes through. And then we look at the hidden sensory systems that we don't often talk about, but that are so important, especially when you're looking at how do I regulate a child and how do I get a child ready to learn, to pay attention, to focus. And that's your sense of movement and sense of body awareness. And basically, the organs are inside our bodies of these sensory systems. They're not on the outside like our ears. We can't see them, our eyes, our fingers to touch. And those systems are not used enough. And a big reason why they're not used enough is because parents are not as, and individuals, not even just parents, but individuals are not as aware about these sensory systems and also the benefits of bringing these into our daily lives. And like you were saying earlier as well, Colin, kids also have a natural instinct about what they need to do. Maybe they're moving around a lot more, but they also know what their bodies need. And it's that sensory system saying, this is what I need now. And it's important to listen and observe the cues that our children are actually giving us to say, okay, this is what my child needs right now in order to finish this exercise that we're busy doing, or we need to do this before we get into another exercise as well. This is what's going to help him in this moment so that his brain is ready to learn. And we can go to the next slide.
Before we do, I did my master's research in pupil behavior management at a time when corporal punishment had just been outlawed in our country. And I was interested in what are teachers doing instead of corporal punishment, and in fact, what successful strategies are teachers being able to use instead. In that research and in the literature, the illicit noise and movement are the two most common forms of misbehavior in a classroom. Okay, it's like 80% of the misbehavior in the class is a child making a noise when they're not supposed to, or moving around when they're not supposed to. Okay. And so as teachers, we get conditioned to interpret noise and movement as a negative, as a lack of attention, as a problem in our class, as a distraction in our class. And then when I've seen teachers who were successful at managing children's movement, they were less concerned about noise and movement because they kind of encouraged noise and movement as part of the learning process. So what teachers often do is they plan what they're going to say, what they're going to teach the children. What they don't spend as much time on is what are the children going to be doing while this is going on, or what is it that I expect the children to do in the class today. Now, perforce in an online space, and in our online space, 80% of the time, the child is not in the presence of their teacher. Yeah. So having the skills to be able to regulate your behavior without adult supervision is a core, I would almost say, survival skill.
Yeah.
When it comes to this sort of thing. And just last point. So what struck me while you were talking was when children want to learn, or when children are now supposed to learn, having a ritual that they follow to put themselves into a position to learn is quite an effective technique. And that ritual often takes the form of some sort of body awareness and movement. So, and we might get to this, but one of the reasons why matric exams are so hopeless at measuring children's actual capacity is because they've done under extremely stressful conditions. So your fight, freeze system is going nuts at that point, and all your higher order thinking has been shut down. And just simple techniques around breathing, simple techniques around muscle tensing and relaxing, visualization of what you want to do in this exam children learning to do those things actually has an incredible impact on their performance in those kinds of exams. So I was very interested to see, that, because from what I've taken out from what you've said is the things that we ignore most in terms of our sensory input are often the things that might help us most in those circumstances. And the takeaway for me, for my parents, is to say to my parents, are you having those conversations with your children? That, can you work with your child to say, okay, you're going to have to do your maths now. What are you going to do to put yourself in a mindset to do maths, and that sort of thing. Okay, let's move on, and then maybe we can speak a bit more about that.
Yeah, we are definitely getting there. So this is basically the learning zones, and I'm sure that many teachers are also quite familiar with this as well. But it's to see where your child is and when are they ready to learn, basically. So there are different zones that we go throughout the day, and it's not only children. As humans, we go through this throughout the day. And we can go through cycles of this more than once a day. It really depends on who you are and what you're going through and experiencing in life. Or you could stay in 1 or 2 or 3 zones in a day. And it's the same for our children. If they're going through a really stressful stage, they're going to go through certain phases or cycles of this continuously throughout the day. So if we look at this, we look at the colors, and the green zone is where we want kids to be, because that is the optimal state of learning, of playing, of engaging, socializing, connecting. And that's where they're wide awake and where they're also feeling normal, calm, and okay, and contained. And then you get 2 sides of the scale. The one side is where you get excited and wiggly and animated and body out of control. And then you get the bluish purplish side, is where they're very tired, bothered, sluggish, eyes are almost closed. They are just not with you. So these states are completely normal for people to go through throughout the day. And I think that's also something important for parents to take away, is that if your child is not in a green zone, that's okay. It's normal, and your child can get to a green zone. So there are strategies and tools, and like you were saying as well, Colin, there's different things you can do to get ready to learn, things that you can be aware of. And many young children don't yet have the emotional language of, oh, I'm feeling really tired, or I'm just not well, or I'm super excited, I'm struggling to concentrate. So it is important for parents to be aware of themselves and be aware of their kids, so that they can start building this language with their children and start saying what they see their child behaving and responding to as well.
So naming it is quite a useful tool. So if you're saying to the child, I see you very wiggly right now, or I see it's or even asking, how do you feel right now, so that they can name it. That the takeaway that I can pass on to my parents here is to do that.
I think that would be great, because that awareness is the first step. So we did have 2 examples that we could just read through, that I could just read through and you could just listen to quickly, and we can kind of see, okay, where does this child, which zone does this child fall under? So the first one, we look at little Tsepiso. And Tsepiso is a fussy 3-year-old boy. He's crying because his shoes are too tight, his socks are too lumpy. He yanks them off and hurls them away. To prevent a tantrum, his mother lets him wear bedroom slippers to school every day. She has learned that if it isn't shoes or socks that bother him, it is inevitably something else that will trip him up during the day. So this is Tsepiso, and Tsepiso really doesn't sound like he's in the green zone for learning. He
sounds like he's in the excited red zone to me.
So if we go back to the slide, you'll see he's definitely there. He's in the yellow, orange, getting to the red zone very quickly. And what's important to see is that sometimes kids could take a long time to move between the zones, and other kids could take a slower time to move between the zones. It really does depend on the child. Okay, and then we can look at Layla. Layla is in grade 1 and she's often in a daze. Her response to the world is, oh my, she doesn't seem to see where she's going. She bumps into furniture, stumbles on the grass. She's very slow to put her hand out to break a fall. She doesn't even appear to hear ordinary sounds. Other children her age have developed to stop, look, and listen, but not Layla.
So brain sludge.
Yes. So definitely blue going down. So in one of those zones.
Yeah.
So so this is basically to see these are 2 examples of these kids. And now what can we do to get these kids and any child who's not in the green zone into the green zone? And what this basically shows us is that we have our brain and we have different parts of our brain, and to use the part that's thinking, that can pay attention, that can problem solve, that can concentrate for a long time, we've got to get out of a fight and flight, like you mentioned earlier, Colin. So out of that a fear state that we could be in. So when we look at sensory integration, sensory integration is using a bottom-up approach in the brain, where a top-down approach would be very logical and reasoning. So, for example, if you're going for talk therapy, that would be a top-down approach because you're talking through whatever it is that you're
dealing with. Yeah.
Yes. And a sensory integrated approach or sensory processing approach is going from bottom up. Because when kids are often not in that green zone, especially kids under 10, it's really hard to get them to actually reason, think logically, problem solve. They're still really acting on impulse at that age. As much as you say, stop doing this, and as much as they may want to, it's just an impulsive behavior that they're still presenting with. But the bottom up, so they're not in the state to go top down. They're in the state to move bottom up. Let's get this child regulated. Let's get this child calm. And then we can bring in top down or any other approach as well. So the sensory tools like the movement and body awareness is really looking, and any other sensory, whether we use vision, touch, taste, smells, it's really going from the bottom of the brain up. So getting the child into the green zone using that approach. Great.
I did, when I was looking at your presentation earlier, in preparation for the webinar, I did notice you had these hacks that are coming up. And I thought to myself, that's really cool because that's very practical takeaways for the parents listening to this webinar or watching this webinar right now to be able to use. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this.
Great. No, these are really exciting. And often if you're at home teaching your child, you'll realize that you need these sensory hacks as much as your child may need these sensory hacks. So this is something really great you can do with your kids. It's not something the kids only can do. And as you get more familiar with what this actually is, kids can start choosing the hacks for the day. They can really start taking ownership of what they need and what feels good for them as well. So
three before me.
Yes, exactly. That will fit in beautifully with that model as well. So if we look at the sensory strategies, there are 3 main types of sensory strategies that we often speak about. And the one is a sensory hack. And those are things like the 3 before me model. So things that you do throughout the day. And these hacks are usually less than 5 minutes. Sometimes kids may need more, sometimes but less than 5 minutes. They should be short bursts given throughout the day. So if it's in between a long lesson, you'd split the lesson in half and do a sensory hack in the middle. You'd do it before a lesson to get their bodies really regulated and ready to learn, get them to the green zone. If you see they're getting really anxious or really wiggly, that's a good time to bring in a sensory hack. And then a sensory diet is basically a lifestyle change, which is often also routine based. So like you mentioned as well, Colin, waking up and doing, 5 things in the morning, to get your day going. This is something that's, a set, almost like a food diet that you would eat, but it's sensory. It's through your sensory systems.
Yeah.
So you'd keep that consistent throughout. If you know that every Tuesday you have swimming, that's part of your sensory diet. It's giving you that kind of input on that day for that long. And then sensory ergonomics is really looking at the environment. And I know this can sometimes be tricky for kids who are learning at home. They don't always have a set structure, like a classroom type of structure. But this can also be really helpful because you have that independence of creating a learning environment that suits your child and suits your child's needs. Does he need something bright on the wall, or does he need something that's more low tone, more of a lighter color on the wall? Which way should his chair face? Should it face the kitchen, or should his back be facing the kitchen? Do we close the door, keep the door open? Does he have enough space to move around when he's doing his movement sensory hacks in the room? Does he need to work in one room on this day, and then later in the week do we need to change it up and move to another room? So there's a lot of these kind of ergonomics that you take into, like, considering the sensory environment and the learning environment of the child, what works and what wouldn't work.
So, I mean, I love the concept of ergonomics. Very fortunate to go to La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which is the basilica built by Gaudi, where the whole, he was one of the fathers of ergonomics, where the whole idea of changing your environment to suit your body shape, is what that is all about. And I'm just mentioning this simply because I don't know that everybody understands what the word ergonomics or the concept of ergonomics are. I know I use a standing desk, and I know that the height of the desk matters. My arms need to be at right angles when I'm typing on my keyboard. The eye line of where the screens are is very important, so that my neck is in the right position, so that I don't end up with neck pain standing and working on a computer all day. And we also have some of our parents who developed, and there's a webinar that I did with them earlier in the year, who have actually developed furniture for homeschooling parents.
Nice.
With the concept of ergonomics in mind, so that you can adjust the height of things so that they match your needs. So I would also say, one of the takeaways for our parents listening to this webinar is, and we've said this in newsletters, we've said it in various places, think about the learning environment that you're creating for your child at home. Do they have to be in their room, or do they have to be in a different room? Does some children need to make a separation? We teach our youngsters, I don't know if it actually happens, but it's something that we suggest happens, is that before you start learning, you make your bed. You kind of put away your bed. You don't learn on your bed. Your bed is for one purpose, and your learning space must make enough of a difference to get you to make a mental shift in the process. So cool. I feel like I can talk to the two of you the whole day. I know that we have a limit to our time, so let's move on.
Yeah.
Great. So these are just some basic sensory hacks using the different sensory systems. And the first one is breathing as well. So it's a tool that you always have available to you. You don't need resources. It's something that kids can do at any time, at any point. And it's something that, adults need as much as kids do as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that also breathing also, helps with interoception, so that body awareness of internal, your organs, as your tummy's moving out, your lungs are expanding and going in, but it also has a lot of deep pressure, so that body awareness input that's coming in. And then blowing, so blowing through a straw, blowing through a tub of water with a straw, blowing a balloon. So there's obviously different, different types of blowing bubbles, and that's also really giving that pressure around the face and around the mouth. It's getting that nice deep pressure, that body awareness, helping with the regulation. And then sipping, sucking, and swallowing as well. So you can see a lot of these exercises are really tension type of exercises.
Just make more coffee so that you've got an excuse to suck and swallow. Yeah, got it. I like the third one the most.
So is it actually the caffeine, or do you just like the sipping?
Well, I've never thought of it before you've brought it up. So we're about to find out.
Exactly. So that's something to that's something great for kids can do.
I can just add in here, like a lot of parents don't like chewing gum, right? They don't like giving their children chewing gum. And I found I had a struggle at one point where picking up my children from school was such a struggle because they just wanted to stay at school, or it was like, or even from a play date or from anywhere. And my initial trick was like, oh yes, I've got some sugar-free bubble gum in the car, because they were not allowed to have bubble gum and they could only have it in the car. It was like, fastest.
Sneaky mom.
Yeah. But what happened is that they would chew and they would just sit quietly in the back seat chewing, because they've got all this deep pressure now coming through their jaws, and they just seem to have regulated. We'd get home and it wasn't a scream and shout like I want to go back to where I was from. And it became a hack. It's now still a hack, so
make the transition.
Finding realizing, my therapist brain kicked in after mom brain of bribery. it switched into therapist mode, and I realized there are other things. My children need regulation. They don't need bribery, they need regulation. And what can I add into that car trip or into that time that's typically quite tough? So suck and swallow it, the things that, you wouldn't typically use and, considered taboo, if you don't want to give your children sweets and treats, think of them differently now,
The kids are cheering right now.
Okay, cool.
And then movement and touch. Cool. We can move to the next slide.
Yes, this is cool. Now we start to get, and this is something our children can easily do. They're learning and in between their learning, and also my teachers could say, guys, come on, we're doing some chair yoga now.
Yes.
The teachers can also sort of prompt this as they go.
So this can be also before lessons, in between lessons, and really 3 simple exercises. Do them twice, thrice, 4 times, and you'll see and feel a change as well, just at the kids' behavior.
And then there's also the added benefit of motor planning, right? So what a lot of our kids do struggle with is copying movement, and copying has obviously implications in all our learning. And using the body as a form of copying is motor planning. It's rewiring the brain, creating new routes, but through a different exercise, So that's why we also love all these sensory hacks.
So I don't want to rush through this, but we are going to share these slides.
So that's perfect.
So they can read these at their leisure. This one, I need to just practice this like every 5 minutes on some days. Just to jump back though, the idea of just takes a minute. And it makes a massive difference. And we talk about flow states, being in a flow state and being in something I'm very conscious of given my workload is, how do I make sure that when I am working, I'm maximizing my potential? I use my Apple Watch and I put a timer on it. So I will run 20-minute timers to see. And then at the end of that 20 minutes, I try to reflect on, have I gone off topic? Because I can easily be distracted. So am I now working on something I didn't intend to? Or, is this, how productive was my last 20 minutes? is a thing. When I make myself a cup of coffee, I put the timer on 3 minutes because I forget to drink my coffee, you see. So the timer goes off, I remember to take another sip. But anyway, as you can see, me and coffee. And I want to just mention there are apps, and we might need to look for one of those for our children that we can put onto their iPads for them. But looking at this iExercise app and the whole idea of iGym, using your eyes to assist you in your ability to concentrate, but also when it comes to reading.
Yeah.
I'm sure that as professionals, you're going to tell me children doing these things are also beneficial in terms of their learning to be more efficient readers as they go along. The one thing, and Bash, you'll have to explain this to me, I have no idea what that top right-hand image is telling me to do.
Go in a circle.
Oh, okay. So move my eyes in a circle. Okay, got it.
Oh, no, sorry, that one. Oh, that was convergence and so looking at something close and then looking at something far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, yeah.
And it's important to remember that the eye is a muscle, right? There are muscles
Yes.
around the eye, and that's what we want to exercise. And I think also to be mindful that sensory hacks are scientifically proved. You want to use the ones that we know have been proven.
Evidence of being effective.
Or your neuroscience, that have that evidence to be effective. So to also just check in with what's out there. And yes, I think apps and ways, there are lots of ways to enforce it in a friendly way. It doesn't have to, this is not militant. We're not at the military, do your eye exercises now. It must actually really be intrinsically motivated. So something that you want to do. And maybe today you do your eye exercises in front of a mirror, and tomorrow you do it, staring at another person. You can both mirror your eyes. So there's different ways of, and adding novelty is super important. So I, as a parent, I know that you can't do the same thing over and over again. It will get boring. I mean, that's humans in general. We lose interest after we do something for too long. Just to
can I ask, and I don't know if it's in the presentation, but can I ask, are there places people can go, like Pinterest or something like that, to find more? Because what made me think of that is your point about variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
So obviously finding some of these things. Are there places? Are there any recommended places that you would recommend we go to look for these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pinterest is one of them. There are plenty OT and sensory related, but we often struggle, and we as therapists, obviously, we want to keep safe, and saying that you have to know your sensory profile before you're using something. So you must know whether if this hack is going to excite me or it's going to calm me down. So some sensory could do different things to different people.
Good point. Good point.
So we struggle to always just say, go here, find this, use this, but you want to also understand if it's if it's recommended for me, for you, for your child. And that's obviously, we're not trying to punt our service, but just to be cautious. And
no, I mean, obviously,
it's any hack,
I've got to know that it is having the desired effect, and sometimes I need some expert advice.
Yeah. But there's lots of things, like there's a sensory swing, but you could put your child in a sensory swing and they could be vomiting in like 3 minutes because you've overstimulated their vestibular system, So those kind of things we just want to be wary about. But we're coming to a close, which is exciting, and hopefully the take homes are going to be
useful. Yeah, I'm sure they will be.
Yeah. So this is the last slide, and it's mostly around communication and connection. So really getting to communicate what you're observing in your child, getting to use the right kind of language with your child. And I think what's important about this slide is that communication and connection is between everyone involved in the child's learning, whether it's the teacher, the parent, the therapist, the au pair, whoever else might be in the in the circle with the child. It's really about communicating the child's needs and how they can stay regulated, what helps them, what doesn't help them, so that everyone's on the same page. And then setting common and realistic goals. And what's great is to have a checklist for teachers around the child's observation. So at home, maybe you have 3 kids and it's hard to keep track about who's having a meltdown when, and who's in the green zone and who's in the yellow zone all at the same time, or is it different times? So what's great is really having a diary for each child and just noting, what you observe and when you observe that. Because whatever happens in our environment influences the way a child would respond. So some things might be too stimulatory for a child, other things may be just too little. They may need a lot more. So that will help to keep the diary to see, okay, every time I actually pull out the maths book, this is what happens. Or, every time we do this activity, this is when I see my child doing this. And you start to see patterns about what works for your child, what doesn't work, what makes him feel anxious, what pushes him into the into the red zone or the blue zone. And then having those sensory hacks for kids in the learning space, where you could also have them written on pieces of paper, and they can pick one out of the hat and they can choose one for the day, and that's their hack for the day. It can be really creative. Kids can also invent their own. So once you start realizing that, oh, it's about movement, my child likes this kind of movement, he can create a game for us that we do for 2 minutes. Giving children that empowerment to choose and to also take control of the situation is also great as well.
Back to the agency there, because that's what the research also shows, that agency is more likely to be present when there's choice.
Yes, exactly.
So being able to choose what you want to do is important. All right, here are the takeaways.
Yeah, so there's 4 main ones. And the first one, the child's environment is where the magic happens. So really setting that environment up and really understanding the influences the environment has on the child and on what zone they're in throughout the day.
If I can interrupt you for a second there, sorry, Bash. One of my parents in Cape Town, I'm aware of, we were doing structures, teaching them about structures, and she loaded the boys up in the car and they went and looked at all the bridges in Cape Town to try and align what they were learning in class. And then she knew we were going to be focusing on plant cycles and the biology side of plants. So she drove the kids to the Kirstenbosch Gardens and they had their lesson in the Kirstenbosch Gardens. So I think one of the superpowers of homeschooling, in terms of your first recap point, is the ability that a parent, and I know many of our parents work, so most of our parents might not have these kinds of opportunities, but where possible, that opportunity to say, let's try and create, or let's take, like with the Kirstenbosch example, you're taking your child into the environment that relates directly to what they're learning about. And they're then able, and parents can do that on weekends. I mean, parents can do that in brick and mortar schools as well. But, it's for us, there's this incredible feedback loop that you can't generally accomplish in a classroom environment, where you can actually change the entire environment that a child is in to match or suit what they are learning at that point in time, which is fascinating to me. Yeah.
That is amazing.
And if you need help with figuring that out, if you are, with an environment, like if you have a learning space and be like, what can I do here? What would support this environment? That's also what we're there for. We don't have to work directly with the child or directly with you. We can work with your environment, So I think it's also important to say, if you need help, ask for it. It's okay if you don't have the creative skills right now because you're overloaded and you're also in the red zone. It's about finding that support and saying, okay, what suggestions do we have for?
A great anxiety that homeschooling parents generally have is, am I doing the right thing?
Yes.
Working?
Yeah.
Am I disadvantaging my child? There's quite a lot of parenting anxiety that goes along with homeschooling as well. Yeah. Okay. Awareness.
Yeah, so awareness and language is key. So exactly, being aware of the different zones your child is in throughout the day, being aware of your own zones throughout the day, and then working around that, developing your child's language so that he understands what
Yeah.
he's going through. And then, number three, learning zones help determine readiness for learning. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of that in the presentation. And using the bottom-up approach to regulate. So talking to the child in that moment where he's not in the green zones, not always helpful, especially with younger kids. So you've got to use a bottom-up approach. Use your sensory systems. It's touch, taste, vision, moving, deep pressure, that body awareness. Give that to your child, get them to regulate, and then you can always bring in the top-down approach.
Yeah, so I mean, I as a person who's focused on not behaviorist, because that's a particular philosophy, but student behavior and how one manages behavior in a classroom environment. This concept of trying to remedy something when the child is angry, or when the child, or you trying to do it when you're angry, is very counterproductive when it comes to managing the learning context and zone that the children are in. So as a result, again, one of the superpowers of an online platform like Evolve is we record all our lessons. So if you're having a really tough time right now and you're not in the zone to learn, well, go and kick a ball around outside, come back and watch the recording of the lesson afterwards. There's just that flexibility that you're able to leverage, that I think is very difficult in a traditional school context to leverage, because you've got these 32 children, 25 children if you're at a good school in the class, and you're now trying to regulate the behavior of those 35 kids. Very difficult to do. How teachers manage that is often a miracle to me, and how the good teachers do it well. And here I'll say, I'm a matric English teacher. Please don't give me a group of grade ones and expect me to be successful at teaching them. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, very important. Now, I'm going to leave the slide up for a while so that our viewers our audience can just have an opportunity. If they watch the video afterwards, obviously they can just pause it at this point to get your contact information. Our webinars are not about endorsing a particular product or that sort of thing. So I just want to be very clear to my families. I'm not saying that Evolve endorses the use of my online therapy for all your therapy needs. I'm not saying that by any means, but what we do try to do is find like-minded organizations that we can associate with, partner with. I certainly plan in the future where we have our own challenges around these sorts of things. We find lots of children are in the homeschooling frame because of neurodiversity or particular learning needs. And there's only so far that an online school can provide support for that. And then if you are isolated, and going back to what Ren said right at the beginning around access, what struck me when I met you guys was just that opening up of access to people who otherwise would not normally gain access to these kinds of services. I'm assuming that I don't need an answer now, but I'm assuming that if parents want to know what this is all going to cost, they can engage with you to understand that, and they need to understand that obviously this does come at a cost. But what doesn't come at a cost, and what I'm incredibly grateful for, is the amount of time the two of you have dedicated today. I'm in a professional environment, especially when you're self-employed like you are, time is money. And the fact that you've given up, 2 hours of your day just to talk to me and to be in this webinar, I'm beyond grateful for. I think that there's so much that I hope our parents have been able to learn from what you've said, some really practical tips that they can take away. And so thank you very much, both of you, for that time and for that expertise that you've freely shared with us.
No, thank you, Colin, for having us. We also would love parents' feedback. We'd love to hear from them, to say, actually, this was a bit over my head, or can you just give me like a list of give us feedback. So that's why we want to create an accessible service that is approachable for parents. I think we don't want to be in this loggerhead between therapist and parent, or teachers and therapists. We really are trying to disrupt the system a little bit so that we are all on the same place to support learning, education, play, and a world that we want to see, in the future, and one we have for our kids. Yeah. So give us feedback, positive, negative. We will take it and we will make it work, because that's what we're here to do. And thank you for your time and your platform as well, Colin. And we feel like it's a like-minded partnership that we're willing to just sort of
invest in.
Journey, and invest in. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great.
I finish with what is, for me, the foundational truth of Evolve, which is, what should a child know, be able to do? And I would encourage my parents, if you are wanting to start the journey of understanding, getting that answer to that question, whether it's in the milestones of development side of things, or whether it's educational, or whether it's, I want my child to know how to tidy up their room so that I don't have to do it every day. Just defining that statement of what is it, and in an iterated way, what is it my child should know and be able to do. Thank you both, and just a reminder to the audience, please feel free to put your questions in the comments below. We will respond. Also, email us. You can reach out to Ren and Bash using the number there, or you can send emails to info@evolveonline.co.za if you want to engage with Evolve as well. I do think that we're going to have many more conversations, and look forward to that. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Colin. It's always great chatting to you.